Remember when I said I was back with new content? You guys might have to get used to this. For my New Year's resolution, I want to publish as many videos as I can and reach 500 or maybe even 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But we'll see. Anyways, during this extended break of mine, I decided to watch some anime. Now you might be thinking to yourself, but Mr. Anyhive, don't you always watch anime? Yeah, you heard this song and dance before. I took another extended break and had time to watch shows on my watch list. Now, let's take a look at all the shows I've been watching for a second time, starting with Cyberpunk Edgerunners. But before that, don't forget to hit the wacky subscribe button down below and hit the so you can get notified when a new video comes. On to the review. The first show on a long journey of shows that I watched during my break, and trust me, it's long. There were many more shows than I thought, so I figured I would divide it into separate parts, so every show can stand on their own, rather than be lost in the sea of one video like I did last time. Anyway, on to Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Probably the most popular show of 2022 besides Chainsaw Man. When it was released, it was all people talked about. Even people who haven't watched anime watched this show. It was that popular. Now, being based off Cyberpunk 2077, this show could be anything and be better than the original game. But it managed to be so much more successful than the game. Why is that? Probably due to it being an original story utilizing the spirit of the world of Cyberpunk. Now, as I was saying about the game being bad, I actually enjoyed the game. The story was really interesting, and I loved the setting, since I like sci-fi a lot. The reason most people didn't like it was because of how buggy and unstable the original game was. After all the updates, the game runs pretty well now. This show even made people go out and try the game. Kinda like Arcane, but also like Arcane, for me at least. I thought both shows were just okay. I didn't hate them, but I didn't particularly like them either. Now, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is about a kid named David Martinez. His family isn't in the best situation, but his mother does everything in her power to make him a suit, which is slang for a well-off businessman. As David begins to realize, life in Night City is super unfair towards the poor. After he stumbles on a Sandevistan, which grants him very powerful abilities, and gets it installed, he meets a girl named Lucy, and she pulls him into becoming an Edgerunner, which is basically a criminal that fights against the government. That's about it in terms of story. This show's pretty short too, actually. At only 10 episodes, it tells a complete story. Rather than being a show about something, it's more centered around how awful Night City is and how cybernetics can really change you. This is the driving force of the game too, but I think the game is a better story than the show. While I think the show is super faithful to the game in terms of how the world works, how things are displayed on screen, and even slang that's used in the city, there really isn't much of a story. I'm fine with shows having no story. That's okay. But the characters have to be good. If both things are subpar, you'll get a subpar product. Unfortunately, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is that for me. Also, back to the whole show being about a concept rather than an actual story. I dislike shows, more specifically sci-fi, that do this. If you're gonna make the audience do the heavy lifting, then the story will suffer, and the story is important. While you can make the characters good in these works, most of the time, they're made with the themes in mind, so they aren't anything more than a tool for the themes. You know what? I have monkey brain, so when I see think too complex, monkey brain die. But seriously, when there's no story and no good characters, I'm just looking at pretty images and nothing else. Style over substance in my opinion, or too much substance, I'm not really sure. Speaking of the characters, I also think the characters don't get as much development as they should. With it only being 10 episodes, it's kinda hard to do that, but it's possible. Just look at Ping Pong the animation. Lots of characters, but they all get their time to shine and even grow throughout the show. And that show's only 11 episodes. Now, I actually like the characters in this show, and their personalities are on full display, but it takes some time to see the more interesting things about them, and even then, it seems kinda fast. Honestly, the characters aren't that deep, even though they can be entertaining enough that you can enjoy them. With how the story is structured around the whole Night City bad, and cybernetics can be a problem plot, the characters are just there to further support this, rather than being fully fleshed out characters. It doesn't help that there isn't much downtime with these characters, so they end up not being interesting enough for the audience to care. Lucy and David are great examples. We get to see them, or should I say Lucy, talk in the beginning about dreams, but besides the second half where she wants David to stop pushing himself so hard, we see nothing else. No personalities on display, and no events with just the two of them talking about stuff not related to the job. That stuff might seem mundane and boring to a lot of people, but it really adds to the work and the characters. Think Persona 4 versus Persona 5, if you've played those games. So many side events to show the closeness of the investigation team from Persona 4, while in Persona 5, it's almost always about the Phantom Thieves, besides the Socialings. But that doesn't count, because all Socialings are focused on one person rather than the entire team. As such, it makes the crew of Persona 5 feel more distant than Persona 4. Anyway, the way they plan out the story of this show is kind of interesting. There's actually a time skip after the 6th episode. From here, I don't really like the direction of the story. I think it's well crafted and it finishes strong, but it makes me sad and I kinda wish they went in a different direction because it seems like the main character just doesn't learn from mistakes made in the first half, and I don't like that. Obviously, this fits with the theme, but what I just said is a personal feeling. The second half is still tension heavy and exciting, but it seems a bit rushed. We do get to see the kindness of Rebecca though, and see her become a best girl, honestly. It's kind of funny because CD Projekt Red didn't want Rebecca in it at all, and the people at Trigger said, "The lolly stays," and I'm not joking. That's so funny. And she's also the character people like the most in the show, which is outrageous because she's the same as everyone else, but out of basically nowhere, she becomes caring. I get that after a big event she becomes caring, but she really wasn't like that in the beginning, and there wasn't really any indication that she changed besides her randomly comforting David. Kinda just feels like she's a crafted waifu to be liked or something. I don't know. So, I showed this show to my sister and her boyfriend, and we talked a bit afterwards about what could make this show even stronger, and have the ending hit better. In order to do that, I have to get into some spoilers, so just skip to here if you don't want to watch. Anyway, the whole show is about how Night City is bad, and cyberpsychosis is a real danger, like I mentioned earlier. Even though they established this, they had these characters die because of this, like Main and the brother of Rebecca. And David sees all these things, so why in the world does he go down the path of Main? Main dies because cyberpsychosis, which happens when you have too many cybernetics installed with you. It makes you crazy because there's too many robotic parts within you. Even after seeing this, and Rebecca's brother dying from a cyberpsycho, why does he do the same thing as Main? At the end of the show, he literally pushes his body to the breaking point and kills himself for it. Absolutely no reason why he had to do this. He says it's because he wants to be stronger to protect people, but the Sandevistan was super overpowered to begin with, and he is quote-unquote built different, and that's what he says in the show, and I'm not kidding. So he can handle many uses of the Sandevistan. It would make more sense if he couldn't save someone because he was too weak. I mean, he couldn't save Main or his mother, but to go down the same path I feel is just bad from my own opinion. But Main dying from cyberpsychosis was 100% on him, and Rebecca's brother's death was a complete surprise, so he couldn't have done anything honestly. Him getting stronger and killing himself for it was kinda dumb in my opinion, and it didn't really make much sense. Literally, the entire supporting cast was warning him that he was pushing himself too hard, but he doesn't listen and literally dies for it. He is basically a carbon copy of Main. Okay, that's it for spoilers. If you listen to that part and disagree, Let me know why you like the second half in the comments below. I'm curious to hear other people's opinions and feelings on it. While my sister, her boyfriend, and I were talking, we also thought, what was the deal with David's mom? Why was she so important to the Edgerunners? They made such a big deal about it in the first 2 episodes, but it turned out to be a whole bunch of nothing. Don't establish this then, is what I'm thinking. If I had to say the best things about this show though, it's definitely the animation, and some of the stories in the show. Everyone really likes episode 6, and for good reason. It really feels like a situation or side story you'd see in the game. It's very good theme-wise, and the way they tell that story through the animation goes so crazy. The animation is by Trigger, and this is probably the best thing that they've made in a long time, I said it. It's directed by the guy who's responsible for the most popular Trigger works, Hiroyuki Imaishi. I talked about one of the works of his in a review of mine from the past, but his stuff is animated very wildly. The characters are very jagged, rough, and sometimes they move like a PowerPoint presentation, but that's a directorial choice. It's a bit different here. Things look way smoother, and even the character designs look cleaner. It kinda doesn't feel like a Trigger work. But then there are things you see here and there, and then you're like, it's definitely Trigger. Unfortunately, this show falls into the Trigger trap, where the animation is good, but the story is kinda lackluster, and it's just made for entertainment purposes. But the animation is good, so that means the entire show is good. Right? I think the opening is pretty interesting because it's a Franz Ferdinand song, which is not a Japanese song, and that's pretty interesting. I also actually really like the dub of this show. It works better than the sub due to slang, but even the sentences flow really well, and the actors sound natural, unlike a lot of anime dubs. I really like David's voice actor, Zach Aguilar. He sounds so natural. It sounds like I'm listening to someone talk to me in real life, and I've only heard that from Max Middleman when he played Ryuji from Persona 5, but that's a game. Anime is so different in terms of the dubbing because you have to match lip flaps, and Zach Aguilar does such a good job with matching lip flaps, but also sounding very natural, which is very hard to do.
Was kinda her dream, all that Sokka stuff. Our dream, I guess. Or whatever.
It's surprising because I don't like his arguably most famous role of Tanjiro in Demon Slayer because it sounds forced, but David sounds so good. All the voice actors are about the same too. It all comes down to voice direction in the end, because all these voice actors are good, but sometimes sound very unnatural. It could be the script, it could be direction. I'm not sure. This show has so much heart into it, but it has very little soul. You can tell that they put a lot of time and care into really feeling like Cyberpunk 2077. But while the show feels like the game, and the themes of the show are as good as the game, there really isn't much of a story, and the characters aren't as fleshed out as I would like. It's more of an entertainment, popcorn watch kind of show. If maybe they went in a different direction for the second half, and had more time with various characters, like the very important relationship between Lucy and David, then it could have been great. I'd honestly say just to play the game instead, but if you are interested in this show, it's on Netflix, and it is a pretty entertaining watch, all things considered. Thanks for watching the first episode of what I've been watching too. I thought this show was gonna blow me away because of all the rave reviews, but it ended up just being okay, kinda like Arcane, at least for me. Maybe my expectations were too high, so when they weren't met, I got burned. It had a lot of potential to be even better than it was, but just like most Trigger works, it seems like it's just style over substance. If you didn't like my review, please leave a dislike on the video and type a furious comment in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to never answer it because it's just an opinion and anime fans are rabid. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so we can get this to a wider audience. See you next time, and don't forget, join the Hive Mind.